When you think about Brazil, what pops into your head? The country is famous for its beaches and carnival, but behind all that glitz and glamour is another story.
We've just had a fire breakout. They are slowly pushing everyone out of the venue.
We visit the Amazon, the world's largest rainforest, home to species and ecosystems that don't exist anywhere else. And we follow the UN Climate Summit, COP30, where many hoped leaders would breathe new life into this natural wonder.
The richest countries have too much power and their voice is heard more than every developing country.
And I think we are not having this kind of conversation inside here.
Just 2 degrees is odd. Now,
if they are another planet, why they don't go now and let us live here in peace?
Cheguei a pé num ano qualquer. Fiquei aqui sem ter onde ir.
Brazil. It's one of those places where the scale of everything feels just a bit bigger. Visitors talk about the cities, its beaches, the traffic, even the sound, each having its own volume.
So lively, it's fantastic over here. It's just a different feeling altogether coming to this part of the world.
Take Rio, for example. It's one thing seeing Christ the Redeemer in photos, but the scale of it in person is a completely different story.
Más allá de todo lo que tiene y de todo el encanto que tiene, el Cristo le identifica en el mundo.
And down below, hundreds of thousands of people visit Ipanema and Copacabana just to bathe in these world-famous beaches.
Tem sabor muito especial, né? Rio de Janeiro.
But you can't talk about Brazil without mentioning Carnival. Samba schools train all year just for one weekend, building floats and stitching thousands of sequins onto costumes. And when they hit the Sambadrome, it is loud and sweaty, a street party unlike any other. But step away from all the noise and the skylines, and Brazil becomes something entirely different. Because running across the northern half of this country is the Amazon River, the largest river on the planet. It's so wide in some places, you can't see the other side. And within it is a system that shapes the weather and the rainforest it flows through. Archaeologists believe human inhabitants of the Amazon first lived here about 11,000 years ago, and from the very beginning found harmony with the forest and shaped the land through gardening in a way that kept the soil rich for generations.
Porque é o nosso modo de vida, a nossa relação com a terra que tem salvado o meio ambiente.
But everything shifted in the 16th century when the Portuguese arrived. They brought with them horses, pigs, and cattle, which became a source of meat and leather. They also brought something a lot more destructive, diseases like smallpox.
And the impact was devastating. A region that once supported around 5 million indigenous people was reduced to roughly 1 million by the 1900s and fewer than 200,000 by the 1980s. For centuries, though, the rainforest seemed unstoppable. Hundreds of billions of trees and plants held up one of the richest ecosystems on Earth. They regulate the planet's climate, absorbing enormous amounts of carbon, somewhere between 90 and 140 billion tons of CO2. The Amazon is home to howler monkeys, jaguars, poison dart frogs, and the fearsome anaconda. 1 in 10 of all the planet's animal species live there, 1 in 5 bird species, and 1 in 5 fish.
It would be an understatement to say the Amazon is important, not just to Brazil, but to all of us. Rising temperatures are caused in part from industry carbon emissions, but when trees are cleared and burned, global forests, like the Amazon, lose their ability to store carbon.
Today, the legacy of colonialism persists. Cattle ranching is now the #1 cause of deforestation in the South American rainforest, as ranchers burn land to make way for their farms. The World Wildlife Fund suggests as much as a whopping 20% of the forest has been destroyed, with almost all of it turned into cattle ranches. One estimate even suggests that since the 1960s, over 900,000 square kilometers have been cleared for pasture.
Grandes áreas que fazem uso do fogo, então grandes fazendas, e elas utilizam esse fogo tanto para abrir novas áreas, então para completar o processo do desmatamento, como também para renovar a área agropecuária.
It is a complicated issue. After crude petroleum, Brazil's biggest export is soy, and agribusiness makes up around a quarter of the country's GDP. So any change here affects millions of people.
Today, much of Brazil's soya production exists to meet global demand, especially from China, which imports more than 1 million tons every week. Enormous tracts of land have been cleared for soya plantations.
Across Brazil, deforestation has been one of the Amazon's greatest threats. Indigenous communities have used fire in a controlled manner over the centuries to support their communities while promoting forest growth. But over the past few decades, trees have been lost because of a more deliberate system that clears forested areas for cattle, sometimes illegally. São Félix do Xingu is a municipality in the Brazilian Amazon with some of the largest cattle herds in the country. Ranchers are legally required to create pastures by restoring degraded land, but it's an expensive process.
Que a mão de obra é cara, veneno é caro, drone ou avião para jogar veneno é caro. Não tem financiamento do poder público, entendeu, para poder suprir essa parte.
It's illegal to burn forests for new pasture. Brazilian officials declared that in 2024, soon after President Lula da Silva came back into power. But satellite data shows that most of the forest fires in 2024 in São Félix began on ranch lands. It's been tough to determine who's been starting them, with small farmers blaming large conglomerates and vice versa. Large companies like AgroSB have accused small ranchers of being invaders and have launched legal cases against them. Small producers say the system is unfair.
A gente não tem direito de nada. A gente só tem direito da multa, da polícia. Toda vez que a polícia vem, você tem que correr, esconder, que se ela te pegar, você... Praticamente hoje, a nossa situação aqui, assim, nós somos criminosos, todo mundo nos considera como criminosos.
It's been an ongoing tug of war in a region that sits on one of the Amazon's driest belts. A historic drought in 2024 transformed routine burns on cattle ranches into blazes that spread out of control into forested areas and scorched 180,000 square kilometers. That's an area more than double the size of Ireland.
Judia muito dos animais, né, que queima tudo, aí falta comida, aí o gado fica magro, sofrido. Foi bastante sofrido para nós aí, a peleja foi grande.
The Kayapo indigenous village know all too well what illegal fires can do. Their crops were decimated because of the flames that began on a nearby ranch.
O fogo chegou até aqui, ó. Depois da mandioca para lá, assim, ó, tudo foi fogo. Foi queimado.
Yane Mara fazenteiro pediu veneno ne bobinha cá cujo corcang se não bore a muito pona bali poglina muito rai ngirikit.
Environmental groups like Greenpeace Brazil say there's a pattern. The biggest drivers of tree loss are large farms and illegal miners who continue using fire to open up new areas. Brazil's government says it's stepped up monitoring in the Amazon and has blamed years of weak enforcement on former President Jair Bolsonaro.
Antigamente, no governo anterior, você tinha uma profusão de alertas e baixa fiscalização.
There's also an issue of infrastructure. Sao Paulo de Xingu is nearly 85,000 square kilometers, but when there's a fire, there's nobody to stop it from spreading.
Não existe uma brigada aqui. Então, se houver incêndio aqui, quem vai apagar?
In a region where ranching is the backbone of the economy and the forest is next door, each fire is a double-edged sword. It means lost pasture for producers and, even worse, destroyed ecosystems in the Amazon. The rainforest has faced years of neglect and harmful market-friendly policies under Bolsonaro. But the Amazon may finally be catching its breath with Lula back in power. Fires are at their lowest level today since records began in 1998. Although Brazil isn't out of the woods just yet.
Mas a gente enfrenta um ambiente que está mais seco, intensificado pelas mudanças climáticas que eles já não conseguem.
This crisis is the reason tens of thousands of people showed up in November at the COP30 summit in Belém, a Brazilian city at the mouth of the Amazon. And from the get-go, President Lula laid out his intentions.
Fazer com que o mundo conheça a Amazônia. Venha colocar os pés aqui no estado do Pará, venha conhecer os nossos rios, venha conhecer a nossa fauna, venha conhecer tudo que a gente tem e, sobretudo, conhecer o ser humano brasileiro e o ser humano do Pará.
But things did not turn out as Lula had planned. Long days and even longer nights brought mixed results and frustrated delegates. And Brazil's indigenous communities were not happy.
Nós não comemos dinheiro. Nós queremos o nosso território livre do agronegócio, da exploração de petróleo, da exploração de minério, da exploração de madeireiros.
Every year, COP summits look and feel the same. 2 weeks of intense talks, late-night huddles, last-minute bargains, endless side events and protests, the full climate summit package. And every year, the big emitters don't want to talk seriously about how their oil, gas, or even agriculture sectors drive global warming. There's always resistance when it comes to helping poorer countries adapt to the storms, floods, and droughts they did not cause. And that's why you hear so many delegates this year asking a pretty blunt question. Is this process actually moving us forward, or are we stuck repeating the same cycle year after year?
Well, that's a $1 trillion question, because there is a big question mark on where we are. This is the 10th year since we got the Paris Agreement, 33 years since we got the convention. We have only seen emissions and temperatures rising. So we should be asking that question.
Well, I think it's extremely clear that fossil fuel lobbyists should not be allowed here, right? Their presence here is harming the process.
I don't think it is elevating. I believe they are taking advantage, using and profiting of us.
We are having more and more deniers in presidents and prime minister positions, and I think we are not having this kind of conversation inside here.
So we need somewhere where not only every government is present, but where we, the people, are there, the eyes and ears and the voices of all those people who are on the front lines, whether you're in Manila or in Kingston or in Gaza. And that's why we need this process. The problem with this process is a question of power. The richest countries have too much power, and their voice is heard more than every developing country.
So these protests and the voices you just heard really capture the frustration inside these halls. People come to summits like this hoping for solutions to what the UN calls an existential crisis. And here in Belém, indigenous groups have led the biggest demonstrations, reminding negotiators that while talks can drag on for days, months and years, the impact on their communities doesn't wait, and they're ready to keep pushing. long after COP30 ends to defend their lands and ours.
So what exactly are Indigenous people protecting? Well, there's no better way to understand what's at stake than to witness the Amazon with your own eyes. So our team went there in a small boat to the mouth of the Amazon Delta, an ever-shifting labyrinth of water, canals and trees. Lots of trees.
Setting off on the adventure of a lifetime.
The sheer beauty and size didn't even feel real. What hit me even harder was the fact that Indigenous people and environmental groups have to convince wealthy corporations and powerful nations it's worth protecting. The idea that nature needs a price tag is wild. Why should clean water, ethically sourced food, clean air, and standing forests need a profit motive?
Fruits.
I met Apoima Shiel, a native of Belém. She knows these waters and the forest the way most people know their own neighborhood. She guides groups through the Amazon, teaching visitors about this vast ecosystem that sustains so much life.
So all around you can see acai plants, yeah? Inside the Amazon, there's a special feeling, yeah? There is a special energy, yeah? That we call Big Spirit, yes? And the people from the city, they don't believe actually so much on it because the colony, the European life, comes a lot over the culture. Yes, and we actually forget our original culture.
This place clearly faces enormous challenges, and Apoima isn't convinced the government is interested in protecting nature.
They want to sell our Amazonia. They want to. They are selling our rivers that they can make the mineration faster and destroy all Pará.
She's talking about President Lula da Silva's Tropical Forever Forest Facility, or TFF. It's a plan that relies heavily on how well market investments are performing.
Seremos inspirados pelos povos indígenas e pelas comunidades tradicionais.
It's called the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, or TFF, and would basically pay countries to leave trees alone. Think of it as a paycheck for nature. If a country reduces deforestation, it earns money. But if forest loss increases, the payments shrink or stop entirely. This model already worked once, when Brazil's Amazon Fund cut deforestation by 60% between 2008 and 2017. Norway paid Brazil about $1 billion in rewards, but when tree loss later spiked, the payment stopped. The new arrangement potentially has huge benefits. Forests already absorb a quarter of the carbon we emit, but the countries protecting them are often among the poorest. So the facility would help make conservation profitable, not costly. And here's how they say it would work. Funds would come from rich nations and private investors, the same ones responsible for emissions. The aim is to raise $25 billion from governments and philanthropies and attract another $100 billion more from private investors. Forest nations would earn steady income, and local communities, including Indigenous people, would gain jobs and funding for forest protection. Over $5 billion have already been pledged and dozens of countries have endorsed it. Brazil was the first when it announced a $1 billion investment to kick off the fund. But some NGOs argue the TFF still prioritizes financial returns over community rights. In other words, they warn this could all end up turning forests into assets rather than protecting people. They're also concerned over how transparent the payments will be, which monitoring systems will be used, and how Indigenous people's involvement would actually work. So the plans on paper and the pledges sound good, but it's hard not to be wary. Rich nations aren't exactly rushing to give, and history reminds us they've broken bigger climate promises before.
You've been hearing that COP30 is all about addressing deforestation, but you've been hearing nothing about the cause of deforestation, which is big industrial agriculture.
Today, the big impacts of the big meat companies are huge in the Amazon and in the Cerrado, in the tropical forests in general.
When it comes to addressing forests, The cow in the forest is really the elephant in the room.
What we are doing, we are burning the forest to produce cheap meat. And that's a huge global demand for cheap meat. That's okay. I mean, we are not saying people to not eat more meat. We are saying people to reduce and to be conscious.
Agribusiness is the number 2 cause of climate change after fossil fuels. This COP being here in the Amazon is a chance to put agribusiness in the climate spotlight. Then we need policies that regulate agribusiness, that protect ecosystems, and that really transform food systems for the better.
Whether the TFFF delivers for global forests and their inhabitants is left to be seen. But until then, our tour guide, Apuema, says she'll continue educating.
The cycles of the fruits, they are changing. Yeah, so fruits that should be later is coming earlier, so the people starting to get used to the new cycle.
There is overwhelming evidence that when indigenous people steward their own land, water stays clean, biodiversity thrives, toxins disappear from food systems, and forests remain standing.
So why the indigenous are the solution? Because they know how to treat and how to regenerate all that we just broke down. Yeah. So we are we want to decolonize our country. Yes. We want that the people now know the culture of the indigenous.
But even though COP30 included indigenous people on the main stage, the solutions they've championed for generations are still being sidelined. Scientists project the planet is on track to warm by as much as 3 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Do you think COP30 is going to make things better for the Amazon?
I hope so. They should pay. The northern people, globe, have to pay just to help us to keep the planet together, yes? So I think that the people have to have conscience that we don't breathe money, yes? I can cut it, put in my nose, but I can breathe it, yes? I can live without water, yes? So I can have all the money in the world, but if I don't have water and I don't have air, what can I do with this money? Nothing. The rich people think they have another planet, a planet B, yeah? But I don't think it's gonna be so comfortable like here, yeah? And this is just crazy thing. If they are another planet, why they don't go now and let us live here in peace, yeah? So get this money, go to this planet and let the people take care of this planet.
And as Apuema bore her soul about the plight of her beloved Amazon, the results of the COP30 climate summit came in. Unfortunately, with no global agreement on the protection of forests or a timeline to tackle the very cause of their destruction. 2 weeks in Belém also reignited old arguments about who is to blame and why.
Nosotros, los países de América Latina que hemos hablado en esta plenaria, no nos comportamos como niños que quieren todos los bombones. Hemos venido en representación de nuestros países. Hemos venido en representación de los millones de habitantes que representamos y con instrucciones precisas de nuestro gobierno.
So as a result, many governments who want there to be mandated tax on fossil fuels are frustrated, and that's why they're basically saying that they don't agree with the outcome on the mitigation work programme. Because you have to have both. You have to have finance and the fair shares of those countries that created this crisis. And then you also have to have mandated outcomes on fossil fuels. And the North needs to act first.
One of the most significant outcomes here is an agreement to establish a just transition system that aims to ensure people aren't left behind as economies move away from fossil fuels. Delegates also advanced measures to support indigenous people and communities of color, as well as forests and oceans. But the final COP text has left out 2 major priorities: a roadmap to phase out fossil fuels, as well, and a commitment to halt and reverse deforestation, both of which Brazilian President Lula da Silva pushed hard for. But during the closing session, several countries, including Sierra Leone, Switzerland, and the EU, objected to the final wording. Colombia's language
was a lot stronger.
The COP of the truth cannot support an outcome that ignores science. According to the IPCC, nearly 75% of global CO2 emissions come from fossil fuels. There is no mitigation if we cannot discuss transitioning away from fossil fuels with means of implementation in a just, orderly, and equitable manner.
We also, like other delegations, cannot accept the draft of the GGA text in its current form. For us, the indicators that have been chosen in this package are not in line with Article 7, Article 9, and Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, nor with the mandate of the UAE Work Programme on Indicators. The many modifications that have been made to these indicators that were provided by experts, in our view, make them no longer functional. The indicators are not clear, nor are they usable for their main purpose, which is to contribute to the second global stocktake.
In contrast, and perhaps not surprisingly, Saudi Arabia and India were among countries that supported the presidency's omitting wording on oil and gas.
We cannot reopen a gavel decision. Doing so would be so dangerous and so damaging precedent to this process.
So quite a few countries are leaving Belém, saying they feel silenced and ignored. And once again, countries that have historically resisted efforts to strengthen climate finance and support for the global south have prevailed, leaving some of the world's most vulnerable communities without the commitments they'd hoped for.